power cycling time and time again. The big point guard and the amount of hits one takes in a day. Is the Jazz draft day actually done? And whatever else comes to mind in a very condensed version of tip off. I have no internet this morning. How many times can I power cycle in one day? Boom, boom, boom. Plug in, plug out. Plug in, plug out. Boom, 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 boom. Why did it work this time and not the 23 other times? Boom, 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 boom. I remember the first time I ever called customer service. Very, like, something wasn't working. They're like, have you power cycled? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what power cycled is, but I'd be more than. Okay, well, here's how you do it. You go around to the back of the device and you pull out the plug. Now wait 10 seconds. Plug it back in. All right, you've power cycled. Let's see what impact that has. Power cycle. Who came up with that term? You mean turning on and off? Somebody in some meeting somewhere at some point writing a customer service guide for the outsourced operator in some foreign country who's going to talk to us about stuff. And they came up with the power cycle term. Well, that's all I've been doing all morning. We have a weird circuit that of our circuit breakers it doesn't visibly hasn't gone, but we have a whole floor kind of hallway of our house. There's no lights all of a sudden. I blew it out with a shop vac. I was cleaning the gecko's cage. Yes, we have a gecko. And I blew it out with a shop vac, and we can't get it fixed, so we played Russian roulette with circuit breakers last night, and in turn, like, destroyed the house. Trying to figure out which one it was. Very, very technically savvy in the house last night. All right, let me get to a bunch of stuff. It's 7:20. I'm actually showered. I'm clean. This is a different version of me. I'm an hour fresher than when I usually record this, but I do have to get the kids. I do need to get the kids off school. OKC blasted San Antonio last night. I'm not stunned by that. I don't think anyone expected San Antonio to go through this series. I think Game 4 will be very interesting. There were a few adjustments that were made, I thought, that changed the game, and one of them goes back to actually a conversation that I had with Scott Brooks last year that I think I've shared with you all quite a bit, which is Scott Brooks and I were talking before a game. We were talking about point guards, and he was a smaller point guard. They count it, and 60 to 70 picks a night set on their point guard. And I think we're going to see a huge change in at least how you defend that position and who are point guards. Cephalosha last night switches on to Tony Parker. The Jazz tried that in Game 3 as well, going with Damari Carroll and Gordon Hayward and bigger players. And it might have worked a tad, and there were other aspects that that worked pretty well last night. They were able to turn Duncan into the primary offensive player of the Spurs, and that's actually the key thing you have to do. The Spurs are 29th in the NBA in post-up offense, and the minute you get them playing post-up, you've got them out of what they want to do. It limits how many passes they can make, where they come from, where they're going to go, makes them much more stagnant, less active, and really, if you go back and read our Spurs Jazz playoff manifesto, Gordy Chiesa had talked about that. And I mentioned in there, we mentioned on the podcast, that if you can single team Duncan in the post and cover everything else and try to get them to go to Duncan, then you really have an advantage on this team because you take away a lot of their aspects. However, I would say, more so, I think the change of the game is Cephalosha on Parker. And what I think is relevant here is the size of point guards is going to as the NBA game has now changed to a almost, other than us and the Lakers under the triangle, an almost exclusively pick and roll penetration and kick game, or when all else fails, we just run the pick and roll. I think you're going to see point guards change. I mean, Devin Harris at 6'3", 185 has in a lot of ways become small. And I think it will be very curious to see how teams defend this. And what's the trick here is that if everyone goes to big point guards, big powerful point guards, like you then lose the dribble penetration and the quickness. So you're going to have to find a way to have the dribble penetration and the quickness, and at the same time have probably a second player who can guard point guards. And for us, maybe that's Damari Carroll. I'm not sure if he's athletic enough. Maybe it's Alec Burks. He is athletic enough. But I think you're going to see bigger and bigger point guards all at that position, or at least defending that position. Kendall Marshall in the upcoming draft is a big point guard. I don't think he's athletic enough to handle that task. Damian Lillard is pretty close to Devin Harris size, I believe. 6'3", listed 6'3", 190. Harris is 6'3", 185. So they're pretty similar. But when you suddenly have the Russell Westbrooks of the world coming at you on one, and the Darren Williams on one level, you need to be large. Russell's listed 6'3", 187, but I'll tell you he's a lot bigger than Devin Harris. I think you'd all agree. But I think it's more just the amount of picks and the abuse that you're taking at that position. You're going to have to defensively be much bigger defending the one than you have before, or teams are going to have to be constituted in a fashion in which your point guard is big enough that he can slide over to guard the two if the one is coming off pick and rolls at the rate that we're seeing right now. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. And so maybe that is you still have an Alec Burks as your two, Burks or Gordon, and they guard the point guard a lot of the game. And then your point guard has to just be big enough that he can slide over and deal with a Ray Allen or whomever the shooting guard is. The shooting guards aren't great. Jazz offseason, I tweeted this yesterday. The Stepien rule is a rule that says you cannot trade two first-round picks in back-to-back years. So the Jazz cannot go get a pick this year by trading 2013 and 2014. But I do believe that despite the fact the Jazz have traded 2012, because that is now no longer a future pick, that they would on draft night be able to trade next year's first-round pick for a pick in this year's draft. And there's some reasons why the Jazz might want to do that. One, I don't think there's any value with this team with four youngsters already at any point along the way adding two at a time. I don't think the Jazz want to add two at a time. In other words, we already have four young kids. Trying to integrate two rookies at a time is very difficult. And right now we're lining up so that next year we would probably get the Warriors pick somewhere around 11, 12, and our pick, hopefully a playoff pick at 18. And you don't want two mid-level kind of talent guys like that to be jumping in to your franchise at the same time. So as the Jazz look at the draft board this year, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they don't jump into the draft in some of those spots we've talked about. I don't know if my article I wrote for KSL.com is up, but there's a bunch of spots where I'm not sure that Houston at 14 and 16, but they have two picks. I'm not sure they want them both. Dallas is at 17, probably doesn't want to ruin the cap space with the quest for Darren. Orlando, depending what they want to do at 19, may not want to lose the cap space. Denver's got some cap issues at 20. The Celtics have no interest in 21 or 22. You're getting pretty low in the draft to be drafting a future first rounder unless it's got a lot of restrictions on it. Memphis has some cap issues, may not want to take that pick. Those you probably just buy into. But if you may find the Jazz popping somewhere into the middle of this draft still with a possibility. And for all you know, they may like some guys. I think there are some players on this board. My general take, having watched a little but not a lot of guys, and my Kendall Marshall piece should be ready pretty soon. Should have been done by now. Is there's obviously the top few guys that are pretty terrific in this draft, and I think that might stop at 4 with Bradley Beal. Then this next tier, and this is always how the draft is. I'm not at all convinced that somehow Tyler Zeller doesn't have a better career than some of these other guys. Harrison Barnes I like, but he's got some issues. Terrence Ross out of Washington may have a better year than some of the top guys. That's all top five. That's always been the case. After 5 and 6, they equal out a lot, and I think you'll probably see that in this draft as well. So keep an eye on that. The one thing to remember, I've started to look at free agents and some of those things. The one thing to remember is that the Jazz still have that a year from now. They'll have 4 players under contract. So anyone we acquire, they have to really decide are going to be major future pieces to the franchise. And then the other one, I was beginning to tear through those free agents, and there's interesting players out there. Willie Green's a shooting guard out of Atlanta who had a pretty good year last year. He shot about 42% from three. But then I start to look at us, and I've got to try to figure out, you still only have a certain amount of possessions a night. Gordon needs to have his. Allen, um, Allen, Paul are going to get theirs unless obviously we move one of them. I'm not sure where we're not losing a bunch of possessions. I mean, Raja used 6 a game. Burks, I'd like to have, and CJ used 10, but that wasn't when they were all on the floor together. And I certainly would like Burks to go about 4 or 5 possessions of usage a game. I'd like Favors to go up 4 or 5 possession usage a game. So some high possession usage player to me is questionable of whether or not that's actually going to work for us in what we want to do and how we're developing as a franchise. I just would hope that we get efficient players. We had too many inefficient players on last year's roster, and when they got hurt, we got better. And there's a lesson to that your bench guys cannot be inefficient players. All right, we'll be back with you Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday. Then I'm heading out of town, and I have not entirely figured out what I'm doing about tip-off while I'm out of town. I'm supposedly on vacation, but I don't really know how to do that particularly well. And I will be 2 time zones to the west. I know life sucks. And so that will make some funny timing things. But all right, we got this one up today. I got to go upload it, get the kids to school. See you guys later. Hope you're well.